Happy 2023, everyone! As we kick off a new year with our old season. So, with 2023 being in effect, there are 3 states that have laws that can be in effect: New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. What does that mean for you? Take a look.
We begin in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul signing several new laws, a few already taking effect as of Sunday. The first requires those of you planning on getting your driver's license. You'll now be required to learn about pedestrian and bicyclist safety as part of the exam. This law is intended to reduce injuries and fatalities. Another law allows college athletes in New York to make money from endorsements without losing scholarships. The change with perhaps the biggest impact on New Yorkers, the state minimum wage is going up $1 from $13.20 to $14.20 an hour, but only for workers outside of New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. Across the river in New Jersey, the state minimum wage is increasing to $14.13 an hour. Also, more than 1 million drivers will be paying about $125 more for their auto insurance after Governor Phil Murphy signed a law that increases the minimum amount of liability insurance drivers need to have. Another law restricts concealed carry guns, barring people from having the weapons in sensitive places, such as schools, courthouses, and bars. However, it's being challenged in court by some gun rights groups who claim it's unconstitutional. In addition, gun owners in Jersey are required to register firearms purchased out of state. Up in Connecticut, a truck tax goes into effect, imposed on certain heavy carriers, expected to generate about $90 million each year for transportation improvements in the state. And also in Connecticut, there are 2 new laws allowing residents with cannabis possession and certain low-level offenses to have their records cleared. We're live on the East Side. Ready to mention Good Day, New York.
Wow. Now, have you been safe during the holidays? I hope you have. If you live in New Jersey, if you're returning to New Jersey schools in New Jersey, mask mandates are returning. Take a look at this.
At Booking.com, finding isn't.
But really, the question is, are we going back to 2020? Are we going back to 2020? We definitely are going back to 2020 with this. But are we really? Watch.
The return to a mask mandate comes with the increase in reported COVID cases, according to Paterson Superintendent Eileen Schaefer.
We want to stay with in-person instruction, and so we're just following the data and the science at this point.
From north to south, 19 New Jersey counties are now reporting a high incidence of COVID. Throw in the winter break and families shopping and celebrating together, and there are real worries here that after creeping up before the new year, the COVID count could surge after the holidays. The mask mandate is fine by first grader and 7-year-old Emmanuel Placencia.
You like it?
Yeah,
Why?
because I don't get sick.
LaShawn Evans has 3 children, one old enough for public pre-K.
We do what we're told. I don't really make too much fuss about it.
The mandate is not unique to Paterson. Passaic City Schools began theirs 2 days before the break. Camden starts tomorrow, joining Philadelphia across the river. And the superintendent here can't say when it will end.
We're going to continue to follow all of that data before we say that the mask can be optional.
Yeah, just basically follow your.
Thanks for watching.
Follow your superintendent's orders. If you're going to school, just follow the superintendent's orders. That way you still can be safe. And kids are saying it's okay. I do believe it's okay. But really, are we going back to 2020? Or are we going back to 2021? When this mother decided to attack the school board to say this mother when this mother went off at the school board in Georgia. Take a look.
Still can't.
Take a look at this.
If you truly mean that, you would end the mask requirement tonight. Tonight. This is not March 2020 anymore. We have 3 vaccines. Every adult in the state of Georgia that wants that vaccine is eligible to get it right now, and every one of us knows that young children are not affected by this virus. They're not. And that's a blessing. But as the adults, what have we done with that blessing? We've shoved it to the side and we've said, we don't care. You're still going to wear a mask on your face every day, 5 and 6 year olds. You still can't play together on the playground like normal children, 7 and 8 year olds. We don't care. We're still going to force you to carry a burden that was never yours to carry. Shame on us. My 6-year-old looks at me every month before I come here and she says, are you going to tell them tonight? Tell them I don't want to wear this anymore. And I say, baby, it's not time to fight that battle yet. I try to explain that there's so many things. But it's April 15th, 2021, and it's time. Take these masks off of my child.
Or we're going back to when this mom threatens the school board.
No mask mandates. My children will not come to school on Monday with a mask on. That's not happening. And I will bring every single gun loaded and ready. I will call every...
That's 3 minutes. You're going past your time.
Yeah, I'll see you Monday in jail. By the way, that threat, that was
Hey,
just,
Jackie, here
that
in
was just
Ross.
a clip. It's really not happening. Up next, back to Philadelphia, to where there was another mask mandate after the holiday break. Still ahead, though, a Dateline Court TV exclusive. We're going to take you inside the courtroom as 2 people are on trial. One was probably for murder, and the other, a witness who saw what happened. Who pulled the trigger? Stay with us. With the new year approaching, kids are approaching back to school, which is not going to be till tomorrow for Fire Bluff. What does it mean for mask mandates? We're not going back to 2020. Listen, we have 3 vaccines, and every man, woman, and child in every state that wants the vaccine is eligible to get it, and young children are not affected by the virus like we saw in that last clip. So, let's take a look.
Have you dealt with anything yet?
I had RSV. I've had COVID myself. He has a cough now, so we're dealing with it just as it comes.
Melva Lewis's family story is like many others in the area. Everyone is fighting off some sort of sickness. School is back this week. That means mandatory mask wearing for 2 weeks for students in the Philadelphia and Camden City school districts. Well, how do you feel about wearing a mask?
I'm okay. Because I wear it all the time.
So you're okay going back to school and wearing it for...
Yeah.
How do you think your friends may feel?
I think they don't like wearing masks.
A spokeswoman for Philadelphia schools tells us if things get worse, the mask could come back again later in the year. In a statement, she says in part, we are monitoring the COVID-19 community indicators and can implement masking when it is high according to the CDC COVID-19 community level indicator, which is currently at medium.
I think that's really the big reason for mask wearing is to keep everyone safe and the school open.
Dr. Jose Terradas works for Vibe Urgent Care and says his facility is seeing more flu right now than anything else, but did tell NBC 10 a new COVID variant is currently making its way around the U.S.
While it does suggest that the transmissibility is higher, we are not seeing it correlate to higher hospitalizations, which for the most part seems to be the trend with a lot of these newer variants, maybe does transmit a lot easier.
You know, we talked to a whole bunch of folks tonight. Of course, masks in schools will continue to be a debate. As for this new COVID variant, the CDC believes it will be the dominant one in the northeast part of the country and eventually the rest of the nation. For now, we're live in Roxborough. Aaron Baskerville, NBC 10 News.
Now, how's it doing in Oasis County? Since reported yesterday, there's over 100 total cases with 1,500 deaths. And since the last 14 days, since 21st to the 3rd, there's over 466. 3 deaths in Oasis County. Texas, total cases 8.1 million, 0 new cases, and deaths is 92,000. Now, what about Flower Bluff ISD? Well, since we haven't done this, so let's catch up on that spreadsheet. Total cases December 1531033. And this part of December, none. 1 for ECC, 2 for staff. Since the first, there's only 2 cases tied. This one right here. The highest one has to be total cases for total cases for the month has to be like 96. That's the highest for high schoolers. So yeah, we really have to make sure that we all know. And as for today, 1 high school staff has gotten COVID, and 1 transportation has gotten COVID. So again, we really need to be doing. We gotta take extra precautions. Like I've said before, we've done this 2 years of COVID. We do segments like this. Masks, very important to protect yourselves. The big mistake people make about this is they don't keep it. They just keep it at the bottom and down here, because it's very easy to breathe through the nose. They may work, but you're spreading more germs. So up here, down here, only up here at the bridge of the nose. Social distance, 6 or more feet. Hand washing. It's very important to wash your hands and disinfect your area. Hand washing. It only takes 20 seconds. Warm or hot water, 110 degrees. Wash your hands, 20 seconds. Disinfect your area. Lysol, disinfectant wipes work best. Also, get yourself vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, you're good to go. Vaccinated once, you have to wait for the 2nd dose. You want to get the 3rd dose? Okay. It's been about 1 year since I was vaccinated, and after the 2nd dose, I felt some side effects, but I was still doing okay. If you have COVID, stay in quarantine. And do not leave quarantine during your 5 days. If you want to go talk to your friends, do a Zoom chat. If you want to go order food, you do delivery apps. After your 5th day, get tested again. If you're negative, you're good to go. Another positive, you stay for another 10 days and repeat the process. You ride in transportation, there's a new thing that's gonna be different this year. This year, if you're gonna be traveling to China, from China, you need to prove that you're negative. Riding transportation like the bus is optionary. If you have a medical condition or religious reasons, you are exempt. Just let them know what's going on. Okay, let's move on now. Let's move on to cheating. And then we're going to take a break. You may remember throughout the shows we talk about cheating. It's always about the tests. And you may remember earlier this year, we talked about teachers being cheaters. So, let's look at a few clips about let's look at these 3 short clips, and then we're going to take a break. Let's start from David Marks, which was 10 years ago, 715K views. Take a look.
All right, class. Hope you studied for your quiz. Now's a good time. As always, I'm going to remind you of how I feel about academic dishonesty. Please keep your eyes on your own paper. You may begin.
Oh man, I didn't study. Marcel. You see that man, Susie?
Matt, what's this?
It's nothing.
What are you doing?
I'm not, nothing. I'm just taking my test.
This is cheating. You look at all sorts of stuff. This is cheating. You're cheating. This is cheating.
In this case right here, he did the good thing. He walked around making sure everyone's cheating. When he caught that person cheating, he confronted and tore the paper up. But the biggest mistake he did was he flipped the table. If it was a skid, it would be okay. But what he should have done was put a 0 on there. If it was the first time, it would have been a 1. Second time, a phone call home. First time would have been 0 on the quiz. Second time would have been a 0 for the semester. Third time, parent had to be called. So again, if you cheat, you get a 0. And then your paper gets torn up. Nowadays, people just use whatever they want. Alright. Let's take a look at this one. 13 years ago.
Right, class, time to begin in 3, 2, 1. No cheating. Okay, class, I need to leave the room for a minute. Remember, no cheating while I'm gone.
Cheaters never win.
Whoa! Feel the thunder, baby! You can't be cheating in school. Cheaters never win. Now get up and don't cheat no more.
That's the lesson learned. So again, lesson is no cheating. Cheaters never win. Cheating school, you get a 0 and you get a paper. And as Carrie Underwood says, maybe next time he'll think before he cheats. Okay. Alright, coming up next. Coming up next. This man is on trial for murder. This man says he saw the whole thing. Who's really on trial here? A Dateline Court TV exclusive. Stay with us. Updating you guys on Oxford. A threat allegation to wake up Oxford school shooting prompts a lawsuit against the Cass City schools. From ABC 12, the family launched a lawsuit against the Cass City School District. The family story said the student never made the threat and was actually talking about the Oxford school shooting. Okay, that's not one way to put it. Now, as for Uvalde, we may never know. There's an independent investigation officer process in Uvalde that happened 10 hours ago from the San Antonio Express. Here's what they have to say. Well, I didn't say anything because of I mean, this guy was correct, so there's probably no updates from Uvalde. But we'll still keep you posted on what's been going on. And last month, the Uvalde survivors filed a $27 billion class action lawsuit against police and others. According to National Public Radio, the lawsuit filed Tuesday in federal court in Austin lists the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District's police department, the Uvalde Police Department, the Texas Department of Public Safety, as well as the individual officers from each of these as defendants. One of the highest ranked officers being sued. So This 59-page lawsuit says everything. If you want to view the lawsuit, then look this story up at npr.org. And something happens, will keep you posted. So, yeah. Here's what's coming up next.
What started on this court landed this man in court.
Do you believe you're innocent, Dexter? Yes, sir.
A celebration on the street. Bullets fired into the air, an open window, and
a woman is dead because some dope decided to celebrate the Knicks basketball victory.
But is that the whole story? Was the wrong man put on trial?
If I was married and had a son, I would want him to be like that.
And a witness with a dark secret of his own. Who would the jury believe?
And as to the charge of murder in the second degree, what is your verdict?
Len Cannon with a Dateline Court TV exclusive.
Stay with us. Imagine this case scenario. You're walking home. You're walking after a game. You're celebrating a big victory because your team won. Then all of a sudden, now imagine the other person is in the window and they're celebrating too, and you see someone out in the street going, "Yeah, we won!" And you hear someone going, "Bang, bang, 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 bang," up in the air, and the bullet hits your wife in the chest. Has that ever happened to you? It happened in the story you're about to see. This man says the jury convicted that this man pulled the trigger. But who was on trial here? This is very similar to the Ken Cannon story. Now, if you don't remember, Ken Cannon was the one that shot the dog. And the neighbor was on trial here because she forgot to call animal control. But who do you believe? Here's Len Cannon with a Dateline Court TV exclusive.
35 seconds away from the Knicks dethroning Chicago Bulls.
It was a time for celebration in the heart of Manhattan, May 22nd, 1994.
The Knicks have defeated the Bulls 87-77.
A celebration that had led to a tragedy just across the bridge in Brooklyn, when a young mother died, killed after a jubilant fan fired a gun to celebrate the Knicks' playoff victory. Before it was over, this low-profile trial would raise important questions about the criminal justice system, about the willingness of prosecutors to cut a deal to win their case, about the unwillingness of witnesses in the inner city to get involved with the system at all, no matter what the cost to justice. In this case, the defendant was 23-year-old Dexter Costello. Even though he had no prior criminal history of any kind, he would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Murder in the second degree.
I think what he did was appalling. A woman is dead because some dope decided to celebrate a Knicks basketball victory.
Brooklyn District Attorney Charles Hines had little sympathy for the accused, citing a depraved indifference to human life as the basis for a murder charge.
You see, one of the problems with the case is that a number of the witnesses described it as an accident. It was quite different than an accident.
The prosecution's theory of what took place on that fateful Sunday afternoon is of a group of 8 or 9 men walking along this Brooklyn sidewalk just after the Knicks' playoff victory, when one of them, the defendant, Dexter Costello, points a 9mm handgun in the air and starts firing in celebration. Prosecutors say at that moment, Tessa Warren leans out of her third-story apartment window after hearing gunfire, when one of those seemingly random shots fired by the defendant ricochets just outside her window, striking her in the chest and killing her.
The people call Ian Azor.
So what really happened? The prosecution needed to rely on the one man out of a crowded city street who could actually place the gun in the hands of the defendant.
Could you hear the general area where the shots were coming from?
Yeah, from right outside of my window.
That eyewitness was the victim's brother-in-law, Ian Azor, who testified that he too was at home in the same apartment building as Tessa Warren's, directly 2 stories above her.
When I got to the window, I saw a set of guys. They were kicking away the shells.
Did you recognize any of those people?
Yes, I did.
Eon testified that he recognized two of his acquaintances, the defendant, Dexter Costello, and another man, Pete Stevens, and saw them handling a gun. It's what he saw Dexter do with that gun that would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case.
He took the gun from Pete.
Who took the gun?
The defendant. And as he turned down his head like this.
Indicating putting his head down with
Yeah.
his chin towards his chest.
Yes, and threw his hands in the air.
Indicating holding his right hand fully extended in the air.
Right. I immediately threw myself back inside. And I heard pop, pop, pop.
Eon says the last thing he saw before ducking back into his apartment was Dexter Costello right underneath his and Tessa's window, pointing the gun in the air. And the first thing he saw, he says within seconds after the shot stopped, was Dexter still holding the weapon.
I called out to him. He said, "Hey, what happened?" I said, "Yo, what the F, excuse my French, you're doing? You're shooting and you're looking where you're shooting?" His words to me was, "Oh, sorry man, I didn't know you was there."
Eon says minutes later there was a banging at his door. He rushed from his living room window to answer the call of frantic knocks. He says it was his niece and nephew. The children led Eon 2 floors down to where he would find a dying Tessa Warren lying near her window.
I ran to her and I picked her up. I said, T, talk to me, now tell me something." And she just, and that was it.
What did you do after that happened?
I said to my mother, "I know who did it."
Eon testified he raced down the steps and out of the apartment building. Determined to confront Dexter, he ran across the street to a bakery where he had last seen him from his window. It was there, he says, that Dexter admitted he had fired the gun.
I said, "Dexter, come. You just killed Tessa." He said, "No, man, I shoot up in the air." I said, "Dexter, Tessa been to the window, you're not Tessa." He said, "Oh, God."
When we talked with Ian Azor months after Dexter Costello's trial, he recounted those moments immediately after the shooting.
I told him, I said, "Dexter, I gotta give you up." The shock, the shock. It was like, I can't believe that Dexter really did it.
Are you absolutely convinced that Dexter is the one that fired the shot that killed Tessa?
No one else could have done it. No one else.
Azor's testimony against Costello seemed damaging enough, but the prosecution backed up his testimony with physical evidence.
I observed ballistics evidence with discharged shells.
Police never recovered the firearm allegedly used by Dexter Costello that day, but they did recover an empty clip and 12 discharged shells on the sidewalk underneath Tessa Warren's window. Also, a ballistics expert and the medical examiner's testimony concurred with the prosecution's theory. The bullet that killed Tessa Warren was fired from the sidewalk where Dexter Costello was seen standing.
The shell casings are 9mm, and the bullet removed at the morgue is a 9mm.
So far, all of the evidence appeared to be pointing directly at Dexter Costello. But as strong as the DA's case against Costello seemed, had they proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt? Remember, no gun was ever found, no fingerprints. And why had only one person out of a crowded city street been able to identify Costello as the shooter? It turns out the jury still had a lot to learn about the astonishing background of the prosecution's star witness and about who else might have been firing the gun that afternoon.
When we come back, you're going to hear the other side of the story. You're going to hear Dexter's side of the story as he walks through what happened on that day. What would the jury decide? Len Cannon continues his Court TV exclusive. Stay with us. You've heard what the star witness had to say, what happened on that fateful day when Dexter shot up at the air, killing this woman. But did he really do it? You're about to hear the side of the story, the other side of the story, as Dexter tells us what really happened. Once again, here's Len Cannon.
Have you ever been in trouble with the law before?
Never. I finished school, had 2 jobs. I've never been in trouble.
In fact, Dexter says he was working those two jobs to help support his family, seemingly too responsible for such a reckless crime.
He worked with me for like 10 years.
David Prine is one of Costello's former employers at an advertising agency.
If I was married and I had a son, I would want him to be like Dexter. He's one of the best kids I ever know, Dexter.
Dave, is it possible that on that day in May, that Dexter just got caught up in the celebrating and maybe just did something that he wouldn't normally do?
Not something like that. Not a gun. Not a gun.
And even Costello's younger brother Shane admits if either of them was likely to get into trouble, it wouldn't have been Dexter. Shane says, in fact, Dexter pleaded with him to stay clear of the traps in the ghetto.
Up to this minute, whenever he calls and stuff like that, he'd be like, Shane, I hope you're not around certain areas and certain places. He doesn't want to hear nothing bad about me and all that.
And when we asked him directly during our interview, Dexter insisted the charges against him were ludicrous.
Were you there at 6 o'clock in the evening, approximately, when the shooting happened?
Yeah, everybody was out there. There were good professors out there. I had nothing to do with it. I never had no gun in my hand.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. But despite having character witnesses and a client with an unblemished record, defense attorney Alan Stutman decided not to call any of them to testify. Stutman decided the best defense was a good offense and began attacking the credibility and expertise of the prosecution's witnesses.
Good afternoon.
Almost immediately, the defense dealt the prosecution a blow, getting the medical examiner to admit that the fatal bullet wasn't necessarily fired from right under the window where Dexter Costello was standing.
So you can't determine to any degree of scientific certainty the direction from which this bullet came, is that correct?
And another point for the defense. If the fatal bullet ricocheted off something outside the window, why didn't police find any damage or determine what it hit before it killed Tessa Warren?
So then you had a chance to observe the window itself, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of these observations, you found nothing which would be significant in terms of evidence, is that correct?
Yes.
After dealing the prosecution two early setbacks, the defense produced an eyewitness of its own, the superintendent of Tessa Warren's building. And it turns out he saw something Ian Azor didn't see on May 22nd, 1994. Not one, but two men firing, Dexter Costello and his friend, Pete Stevens.
The one guy take the gun, shoot in the air. Another one take the gun in the hand, shoot again.
My witness identified Peter Stevens as a person involved in the shooting. It's a possibility that this was the person that did the shooting, not my client.
But there was a problem with the super's testimony. At times, he seemed confused about his own story, unsure about who fired when, still leaving doubt as to whose shots killed Tessa Warren.
Do you know who Dexter is?
Vous savez qui c'est Dexter?
Dexter.
So the defense then began an all-out attack on the prosecution's star witness, blasting the credibility and character of Ian Azor.
Ian Azor positively identified out of a crowd your client.
Well, I have problems with the credibility of Ian Azor. We have to understand that everything in somebody's background can affect their credibility.
And there was something in Ian Azor's background that was so potentially damaging to the prosecution's case that prosecutors had to put it on the table before the defense presented it as a bombshell.
Now, Mr. Azor, I'm going to ask you to think about something, not about this case, but about something that happened in 1973. Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes, I was.
What was that?
Murder.
That's right, murder. The prosecution had to rely on the testimony of a convicted murderer to try and win a murder conviction against Dexter Costello. Ian said he was found guilty of that murder over 20 years ago back in Guyana, but that it was a case of self-defense.
And he attacked me with a knife, and I have to defend myself.
It turns out a Guyanese court not only convicted Azor of murder, but sentenced him to death. And he was held on death row for 6 years before he says he was fully pardoned. But Azor's criminal history wasn't his only credibility problem. The defense hammered away at one more point, trying to convince the jurors that Ian Azor might be an illegal alien.
Under what premise did you come here? Did you have a visitor's visa, a work visa?
Objection, relevance,
Overruled.
I came in on a visa.
Do you have a green card?
Overruled.
I'm sorry? I haven't obtained that as yet. You here illegally?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sir, I have that passport and I don't think that is illegal. Are you here illegally? No, I'm
Objection, that's the answer.
Why was it important for you to try and prove that Ian Azur was lying about his status?
Again, it's a question of credibility. If it's shown to be the fact that he did lie about one thing, a jury is entitled to accept his testimony or reject his testimony.
You know, we don't pick our witnesses. We don't have ministers or rabbis or priests as witnesses. We pick the people we have. For as far as I was concerned, I was stuck with a witness who was the linchpin of the prosecution's case. We either used him or we allowed Dexter to walk free, and that would have been wrong.
But what impact would Azur's history have on the jury? Would they accept the testimony of the only eyewitness who says he knows Dexter Costello's shots killed Tessa Warren, and that of the detectives and the experts who backed up Ian's story? Or would it reject Ian's testimony based on his questionable background and the possibility another shooter may have been responsible for the death of Tessa Warren?
I tell you this, and I tell you the honest truth, as there's a God above. I would not lie on Dexter Costello, and I would not, under no circumstances, go in court and swear away a man's life. No way would I ever do it.
So, who would the jury decide? The star witness or the defendant? The conclusion of Lynn Cannon's story when we come back. Stay with us. And now the conclusion to our story. There were two people on trial, Dexter and the star witness. But remember, the star witness said that he witnessed two of the shooters, Dexter and Dexter's friend. What would the jury decide? You be the judge. Here again, Lynn Cannon.
Who took the gun?
The defendant. Another one take the gun in the hand and shoot again hard. Pop, pop, pop.
After 3 days of testimony, the murder trial of Dexter Costello went to the jury. 3 of those jurors agreed to talk to Dateline.
It's a tragedy. It's someone died. Someone being careless.
I feel bad for him. His life is now, it hangs in the balance.
Because they left a child without a mother. Somebody needs to suffer for this crime.
But would that somebody be Dexter Costello? As the jurors began their deliberations, some wondered why no one in Dexter's group had come to court to back up his story.
If he had someone else to come forth on his behalf, I think we would have more readily believed that he had not been there, or he had not touched that gun and fired that gun.
But defense attorney Alan Stutman says finding anyone to come into a courtroom and testify in the inner city is next to impossible.
We're talking about people that on initial impression would be very scared to come forward. They don't like to deal with the system. They don't want to be involved with the system. You had a man who was on trial for murder. Could you have not found a friend, one friend, to step forward and testify on behalf of Dexter Costello? We asked. Most of the time it's I didn't see, I didn't hear, or I looked away. People don't want to get involved.
And what about character witnesses? If Dexter's friends and family were so certain of his innocence, why wouldn't the defense put them on the stand? For example, someone like David Prine, Dexter's former boss.
I found in my experience, especially in murder cases, it might shift the burden from the prosecution proving guilt to my having to prove otherwise. Here you have somebody being accused of murder, and what do I do in defense? I put a relative on and say, well, he's a nice person. I don't believe that would carry much credibility with the jury.
With character witnesses not an option for the defense, Alan Stutman says he and a private investigator went from door to door on that Brooklyn street, looking for someone, anyone, to exonerate his client. They failed.
Everybody was scared in a way, probably frightened retaliation or whatever, because, that's how it goes in the ghetto.
Dexter's brother says his mother, an employee at a Brooklyn nursing home, spent most of the family's life savings trying to help clear her son.
You could only have the best what your money could afford. Whatever money bought, the savings that she had, that's what she had to use.
You are at this time the defense rests.
Yet for all it cost them, testimony in the murder trial lasted only 3 days. And when the case went to the jury, the only defense eyewitness it could rely on was the building superintendent, whose testimony Alan Stutman himself admits was confusing at best.
Why he was confused, it could have been the pressure of the cameras, it could have been pressure being in front of a jury, I don't know. But he did, in a way, testify consistently at one point.
But was it convincing? As jurors continued their deliberations, it was clear they had all agreed on one very significant point. No matter what Dexter now claims,
he was handling a weapon, and he did fire. And firing a weapon in a city could hit somebody. He should know better than that.
But even if Dexter was firing the gun, could the jury be sure it was he and not Pete Stevens that killed Tessa Warren?
There were two shooters in the case, so we figured one of the fatal bullets came from one of those shooters. Which one we couldn't determine.
Anytime Pete's name was mentioned, it was always an objection. And I kept saying, what is it that they don't want us to know about this other shooter?
In fact, there were a lot of things about Pete Stevens the jury didn't hear. For instance, Stevens has other felony charges pending against him, including one for selling cocaine and another for criminal possession of a weapon. But despite those indictments, Stevens remained free for over a year after Tessa Warren's death. And a police source says prosecutors even chose to offer Stevens a deal in return for his testimony against Dexter Costello, a young man with no criminal record.
It tells me that they took, the police or the district attorney took the easiest way out, the path of least resistance. They had somebody identifying the shooter by name, and rather than investigate to see if there were any other possibilities, they just focused on him and arrested him.
Do you think someone else was responsible for the death of Tessa Warren?
Yes. I think his name was Peter Stevens.
Police say Pete Stevens eluded them for months while prosecutors prepared their case against Costello. And it wasn't until after the Costello trial began, some 16 months after the shooting, that Stevens was finally placed under arrest. He's since been indicted on charges of reckless endangerment and criminal possession of a weapon. So why didn't the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office prosecute Pete Stevens in the first place?
You were aware that there was another person there with a gun.
That case is before the court, and I can't talk about it.
Is it not possible, Mr. Hines, that Pete Stevens may have been the one that fired the shot that killed Tessa Warren? Are we absolutely convinced that he was there and had the gun?
You're going to ask that question over and over again, and I'm going to give you the same answer, and we're going to waste a lot of film. I'm not going to talk about anybody else except Dexter, other than to say to you, if the person who handed the gun to Dexter could have been charged with acting in concert, he would have been.
Stevens pleaded not guilty to all charges in connection with this case, as well as prior drug and weapons charges. But in the end, only Dexter Costello was tried for the murder of Tessa Warren. And the verdict would hinge on the testimony of the prosecution's star witness, Ian Azor.
You heard in court testimony that Ian Azor was a convicted murderer. Did you have a problem with that?
No.
No.
Why not?
Everybody has a past history, why should he be held accountable?
I didn't have a problem with the murder that he committed. I had a problem with his immigration status. When they asked him, he had this sly look on his face like he was getting away with something.
Mr. Foreman, has the jury agreed upon a verdict?
Yes, sir.
After deliberating only 3 hours, the jury had reached its decision.
Under the first count of the indictment as to the charge of murder in the second degree, what is your verdict?
Not guilty.
Under count 2 of the indictment as to the charge of manslaughter in the second degree, what is your verdict?
Not guilty.
Dexter Costello probably was the killer. All the evidence did go towards him, but it wasn't substantial enough to say he is the one.
However, they did find him guilty of something else: reckless endangerment and criminal possession of a weapon. He was given the maximum sentence of 5 to 15 years.
If he had just one more person from that crowd to state that it wasn't him with that gun in his hand, he would be a free man.
Ultimately, the case may have turned less on those who did testify than those who didn't. And one more eyewitness on either side could have meant the difference between a murder conviction or an acquittal. But in the end, the jury was forced to grapple for justice on its own.
Does it bother you at all that you convicted someone in a case where a woman was killed, a mother, and yet nobody is doing time for the murder?
That bothers me because it could have been one of my family members. It's hard because you know that someone is guilty. We just couldn't say who.
Do you feel justice was served?
As best as it could be. We did the best with what we had.
We'll update you about the case up next. Stay tuned. Just join us. We're talking about Dexter, who was charged with murder in 1994, after he fired the shot. Now remember, what had happened was the prosecutor didn't want anyone else, so they called upon Dexter. They only wanted Dexter and what's his name. So what's happened after? Let's find out.
Dexter Costello is now appealing his convictions. As for Peter Stevens, his lawyer says Stevens never had a gun in his hand the day of the shooting. And Stevens is seeking now to have all charges dropped because of his current medical condition. He's been confined to a wheelchair since last year when he was wounded 11 times in an unrelated shooting incident. What do you think of our story? Give us some feedback.
I'll give you my take about this soon. And speaking of soon, a story you'll see coming up soon this year. This year we're going to talk about Children of the Harvest. We may talk about that this week. But coming up tomorrow, which is today, a whole hour about bribery. Another issue that I had not touched on for 6 years. An issue of bribery, meaning bribing the police officers. We'll look at video clips and articles about this issue. And again, I'll give you my take on this story soon. And by soon, I mean on Friday. That's Give Me a Break for this Tuesday going to Wednesday. We'll see you again for Give Me a Break Wednesday. For all of us here at YouTube, Give Me a Break. Hope you had a great day. Good night. Hope you had a great day. And again, have a good night.